we're live.
We are
Um,
live. We are actually
okay.
on the air.
All right. So then let me start with the story that I promised I'd tell. I sort of told people obliquely about this in a video I did yesterday. But before I do that, click the like button if you're with us so that
Please.
we go up in the algorithm. But since we started doing these things every week, I've tried to, upgrade my preparation. So I got a
Sure.
new pair of earbuds because the ones I used a couple weeks ago, people didn't like the audio. So I was like, all
Okay.
right, let me try a newer version of the ones I used last week that were old and see if it's better. But the other thing I want to do is I want to upgrade. I'm sitting in a nice desk chair, but it's 16 years old, Michael, and I got no head support. And we're doing an hour and a half here. I'd like to be comfortable, right? So I've been
Absolutely.
looking at a chair by a company called Lifeform. And no, I'm not sponsored by them or anything. But if you'd like to, guys, want to send me a free chair, I'm all for that. But they're based out of Calgary. And it's the middle of October, and so I'm trying to figure out, they do holiday deals every year, Black Friday, end of November. So for an expensive chair, I'm like, okay, maybe I should wait. Well, there's a problem with that because if I wait, I got to worry about the fact that we just got new furniture tariffs that
Right.
kicked in for
Right.
foreign furniture, and since they're from Calgary and it's Canadian, I got to ask myself, is the price actually going to go up 25% thanks to our great leader who seems to want to make life unaffordable for every American?
Yeah. Yeah. Hold that thought. I just realized that I did not put my AirPods in, so everyone just pause for 1 second while I grab them.
I'll hold your attention while Michael gets the AirPods. Um, but yeah, the chair thing is just a reminder that
Okay.
these tariffs are going to make life more expensive in every area. Whether you need to do a new kitchen, get a new desk chair, he is just making your life more expensive. That's the truth of the Trump
Yes.
administration.
Yeah. It's an interesting observation. I think that we have not, the tariff sort of situation has really kind of gotten been put on the back burner because of all the stuff happening in Chicago and Portland and elsewhere. But it's maybe the most damaging political story for this administration that they are, that Trump is bringing forward these tariffs that have really, I think, uh, curtailed or at least affected economic growth, and I think are not very popular. And I don't know that if we fully if they've kicked in fully, just how damaging these will be or have been. And I think it's interesting that this week there's this $20 million bailout for Argentina because they're for a variety of reasons. I think it's mostly 'cause around agriculture products. I think this is a politically is a not a great position for the Trump administration to take. And I also just think that at some point, the effect of this trade war, particularly on we're not selling any soybeans right now to China, which is a huge part of the U.S. market. I mean, really, at some point, it's going to begin to take an economic toll. You're already seeing some evidence of that, but I just think when push comes to shove, barring the Supreme Court stepping in and saying the president is not allowed to use these emergency powers to impose tariffs, and I'm not counting on that happening. I think this is just going to get worse, and I think the economic impact is going to be severe.
And as we talked about a couple weeks ago, Michael, if you look where it's going to hit, it's going to be Iowa, the Dakotas, that farm belt that I think opens up opportunities for Democrats in some of these places where they haven't been competitive in recent years. Because at the end of the day, the lesson of 2024 and of most elections is that people care most about their bottom line. I was talking to
Yes.
a close
Yes.
friend who is I would say left of center voter, but not like tuned into politics like we are. And she said yesterday, her line was, Trump's America, we can't afford shit anymore. And
Yeah.
if average people who are not that tuned into politics start feeling that way, it's going to be more impactful than the No Kings kind of stuff, than the Chicago stuff. You and I agree that that stuff should be a major focus, that every American should care about this. But realistically speaking, people care more about what hits them in the wallet and what they see. And the Argentina thing, as is Democrats have actually messaged this well by saying, "Hey, we could have extend those Affordable Care Act subsidies with this money. We could do
Yeah.
this with this money.
Absolutely.
America last kind of thing." And I find it a little bit cringy because I support foreign aid. I think it can often do good things as a general premise, and making Americans think it's that or taking care of Americans is not great policy, I don't think, but politically it's brilliant.
But the only reason that they're doing this bailout of Argentina is because the Argentinian president is an ally of Trump. So I'm all for
And you
foreign
saw
aid.
they
I'm not.
threatened him yesterday. They said basically, well, if the left wins in Argentina next month,
Oh,
we may have to do away with this aid and stuff like that. So they're threatening them
wow.
to try to manipulate another country's politics.
Yeah, I mean, well, no surprise there from this administration, right? I mean, this is sort of par for the course these days. But I do think that politically, this is not um, a great policy position for the administration to take. I also just want to say, we did all these show notes preparing for today, and we didn't even mention the shutdown, which is now, I think, 2 weeks old.
Three,
Is it
three.
3 weeks? I was
Well,
looking
they said
today on.
almost. Well, I guess it kicked in October 1st. So it's 15 days. We're entering week three.
Okay. So it's funny. I was looking today on Kalshi, which is sort of like a predictive website. Like it's like a prediction market. And the question was, will this shutdown run more than 30 days? And I didn't take a bet on this, but I was like, I kind of think it will go more than 30 days. I just think that uh, at some point, the Republicans are going to actually, my predictions are going to fold because you're already seeing dissension in the ranks among Republicans who see the healthcare issue as being sort of a problematic for them, including shockingly Marjorie Taylor Greene. And I saw Kevin Kiley, who's a Republican congressman in California. Oh my God, I'm sorry, this keeps falling over. I apologize. Um, who also came out and said we need to negotiate something on this. I just think you're going to get to a point when uh, enough Republicans are going to say this is hurting us, that they may end up compromising. Look, I've said this before, I'll say it again. A compromise on Obamacare subsidies is a short-term win for Democrats, it's a long-term win for Republicans. It's an issue they get to avoid. These premium increases, they get to avoid that going into 2026. So I do think that you see eventually you'll see them come around. But having said that, it could be weeks. It could be weeks until this happens. I don't think it's going to happen at any time. I don't think it happen this week or anytime soon.
Well, I think that there's an interesting dichotomy here. I think you're absolutely right on the ACA subsidies. And by the way, for Republicans, the dumbest possible solution is the thing they're floating, which is a 1 year extension where people would see their premiums go up right at they get notices right before they vote next year.
It makes
Um,
no sense.
but I think the Democrats are going to win on the subsidies. But whether or not that happens in tandem with the end of the shutdown, that it seems like all the Republicans are doing at this point is targeting like 4 or 5 retiring Democratic senators who are not real comfortable with shutting the government down.
Yeah.
And they're trying to get the Gene Shaheens and the Dick Durbins of the world to eventually cave Gary Peters, because they only need another 5 Democrats to break the filibuster. But
That's
so
not going to
there's
happen.
that.
But that's
I
not going to happen.
that's what they're banking on. I
I,
don't
I,
think
I
it
don't think I
happens.
don't think that Gary Peters is retiring or Gene Sheen retiring is going to like basically screw the party over
Right.
by voting to end the shutdown.
That's the yeah.
Thank you,
I
Grace
think
Ebert.
that I think that the Republicans have made a miscalculation here. The Democrats won't go through with this. The Democrats won't stick this out. I think was it Kylie that you were just talking about. I was
Yeah,
reading about yesterday saying, oh no, it was Brian Fitzpatrick, I think, who said that one of these more moderate Republicans saying that oh, I didn't even think they would actually shut the government down. So like they've been all guessing wrong from day one on this. And I mean, I forget who tweeted about it this morning, but they said, we're day 15 of a shutdown, and there's nothing on the front page of the New York Times or the Wall Street Journal on it. This is
y-
just not getting a lot of attention in the same way. And yes, the Republican or the administration is using this to fire a lot of people, the CDC and people in charge of special education funding. And I told people about this yesterday in a video, but they're going to do that anyway. There's like no real incentive to force people to come to the table. And even the thing that usually affects shutdowns, which is the military getting paid. First of all, Trump's paying them, which is probably illegal, but he's doing it anyway.
but
Um,
but I don't understand this is what's so bizarre to me. The Republicans could have played this in such a way where they put Democrats in a difficult position. They could have passed legislation in the House paying the military and daring Democrats to vote against that. Same
Yes,
goes
but the
for
House would
the
have to
border
be in
patrol.
session to do that,
Well, see,
Michael.
but I know, but I don't understand. I guess what I don't understand is the ploy the Republicans have adopted. I mean, the strategy is to leave Washington. And, which I don't understand that strategy because it makes it look like they don't give a shit about the government being shut down. They're trying to resolve the situation. But also, they could be doing things that would put pressure on Democrats. That just passing standalone, spending bills that would be difficult for public Democrats to filibuster. But they're not doing that. And so that's one thing I don't get. That was my big
Well,
fear.
Thune is going there now. Thune is putting the
It's 3 weeks
defense
into it.
appropriations bill up this week that's bipartisan. And my attitude is sure, Democrats should go for that because the House isn't in session to pass it. Um,
Yeah, but they can go
and
back
the
in
thing
session.
is, Mike Johnson is terrified that he has nothing for his members to do, which tells you how dysfunctional Congress is and how useless Republicans are when they have a trifecta, because they could be doing lots of other things even with the government shutdown.
But there's another issue too that we should talk about. Another issue that's driving this is that Johnson is refusing to swear in this
Epstein,
Congresswoman. What's her name?
Gravila from.
Gravila. Thank you. I don't want to mispronounce her name. Gravila. He's
I'm guessing
refusing.
there, so you let me take walk the
Okay,
plank
I,
there.
I hope that one of us got it right. And so he is refusing. I mean, it's crazy. She won like what 2-3 weeks ago. She won that election. He's refusing to seat her, and the reason is pretty clear because if they seat her, then there'll be enough votes to get a discharge petition on the Epstein file and force a vote. So I really do suspect that the reason why they're doing this and not bringing the Republicans back in is because they're afraid the pressure on them will be too much to have to swear her in. And Johnson's basically saying, I can't swear in a pro forma session, which is complete bullshit. They sworn people in pro forma sessions. They did it in
This
April
year,
this year,
or
this
yeah,
year with two Republicans in Florida. So I think it's interesting. The Epstein situation is actually, in many ways, limiting the tactical options of Republicans because they would rather be out and not have to deal with the Epstein issue than have to actually, be in town and put pressure on Democrats. And so you have that factor. You have the other factor too that like the messaging from the White House from Republicans is so frigging bad. I mean, I just can't get over this. Like, you're going to fire people at the CDC. Like, what? How is that a winning message in a shutdown? I know you're going to want to blame Democrats for that, but it just looks like you're the guys firing them, right? We've never had layoffs before during a shutdown. This is unprecedented behavior from this administration, and it is. I sense it's back. It's creating a backlash against them. I do not understand the messaging around this, and give Democrats credit. They have been united on their messaging on this. They have spoken with one voice that this is about healthcare and Obamacare subsidies, and it's why they're winning this battle.
I mean, I think Trump just doesn't really care. The other thing is, it's either about Epstein or another bad thing for Republicans, which is he's worried that if he brings his members back, they're going to cut a deal with Democrats on the ACA subsidies
But he can
or
stop
do
that, can't
something.
he? He's the Speaker of the
Well,
House, for Christ's
like,
sake.
like he can keep it off the floor, but like if there's an announced deal, now it's his shutdown. Now he owns it.
Maybe.
And there's no good way to spin this for Republicans. Look, I'm not telling anybody that this is going to matter by the midterms. It's not. Okay, the average voter isn't paying attention and doesn't care. Um, and even if they do care, it's October of 2025, and we are going to see so much stuff happen in the next 13 months.
Next 13
God only
days, next
knows.
13 hours, the way
Right,
this
right. I
administration is
mean,
going.
Donald Trump's America just sped up an already fast news cycle.
Right? It's
Um,
ridiculous.
and so, I think that they kind of get that this is not, we've always made this to be a big issue in politics, but that in an off year, it's not going to be in terms of electorally. But it really isn't. The Republicans have not managed as well. They could
No,
be
they've
hammering
managed it
Democrats
very,
every
very
day.
poorly. And I take the point that that Johnson's afraid of them cutting a deal. That wouldn't have been the case 2 weeks ago if he kept him in session, right? So
And
this is his own fault. I just think the way they've
and
handled
Michael,
this go ahead. Sorry.
we should be clear to everyone out there. The House went out like maybe the last week in July. Okay. They came back after Labor Day, which looking at my calendar was September 1st. Okay. So they came back maybe the 2nd, right? They've been out since the 19th of September. So they've been in session for like 9 days
I
in the
know.
last
It's
three
ridiculous.
months
They're not doing their
or
job.
something like that. They don't even work. It's the biggest do nothing Congress ever. And I'm just waiting to catch one of them on a beach somewhere where somebody catches them on vacation with the government shut down, because that's where this is headed.
Look, I want to. Okay, you raised a point that I want to get to something that I think we need to talk about as far as you mentioned the midterms in 2026, and I want to bring up something happened this week that I think is really important. So, Democrats have been trying to get Janet Mills, the governor of Maine, to run against Susan Collins for the Maine Senate seat. Now, I want to talk about that. I want to talk about the primary challenge, but something in particular about her announcement jumped out to me. First of all, the fact that she's running. She's 79 years old and or 77, 79 years old,
No, she's
and
77. She would be
77.
79 when she's sworn in.
Thank you. And so that's a very good recruit for Democrats. Although I think in a different cycle you'd want somebody younger, but I think that the thought process here is that she has the most name recognition. She's won statewide in Maine. She's the best candidate. Challenge Collins. We'll talk about more of that in a second. Um, but her announcement video I thought was fascinating because it was basically all about her challenging Trump. Now, you may remember that some of the people on the listening today in February there was a meeting with the governors at the White House. Trump personally went after Maine because they something with money,
Trans.
about trans athletes. She said
Yeah.
to Trump that she would see him in court, and she ended up winning the case. So the entire message was, "I stood up to Trump." Now, again, that's not necessarily that unusual, but the thing was about when it came to talking about Susan Collins, the entire frame of reference around Collins was she's basically a toady for Trump. So the entire message that Mills is, and this look, I have no doubt that this was based on lots of polling and lots of focus groups, like what's the best message for Democrats? And it was pretty clearly, we're not the party of Donald Trump. And it was standing up to Trump. And I think this gets something I wrote right after the election last year, which is that all these postmortems are sort of ignoring the best way for Democrats to get back into position of political power, and that is to do nothing and just wait for Trump to basically fall apart and make mistakes, which he did, which he has done, which he will continue to do, and that is the key for Democrats. Negative polarization. That's the key for them to get back into to win back the House and the Senate. And I think what you saw with the video from Janet Mills is that that's basically the strategy Democrats are going to be using. It's not about, moderating their policies on trans athletes or moderating on immigration. It's about running against Trump. And in a place like Maine, where Trump is basically 40-60 in his approval rating, I think it's a pretty effective message. And it may be look, it worked in 2018 for Democrats. I'm not sure why it won't work in 2026 for Democrats to simply run against Trump. Tell me I'm wrong.
I think you're right about the midterms. At least if they don't have the worst case redistricting scenario, it should deliver the House. I think they probably need a little bit more of a message than that to win the Senate, just because
Do
of the
they?
terrain that they're on. Like, I think it'll work in North Carolina and Maine, but when you get beyond that, it may or may not work depending on where Trump's polling is in red states, which is going to be different than where it is in blue states. Remember in
Right.
2018, they lost Senate seats, despite a wave in gubernatorial elections, in statewide elections, in House elections, because we've gotten to the point of polarization where states are so polarized that they no longer follow the national environment, essentially. That you
Yeah,
end up
that's
in a
right.
situation where you can have a red wave in red places, even as the rest of the country is going in another direction. But otherwise, I think you're right. The caveat to that is all that does is buy you 2 more years to come up with an agenda. Midterms are about the president in power. They are a referendum on the president. The people who show up are the angriest people. We've seen
Yeah.
this over and over and over again, having to Ronald
But
Reagan in 82 and
why can't that
86.
be the message in 2028 also? Why can't 2020 be a referendum on Trump? I mean, you're not going to have
Because he's
Trump on
not
the
going to be on the
ticket.
ballot.
You won't be on the ballot, but JD Vance will likely be the nominee. But what doesn't matter? I mean, look, John McCain was not really tight with George W. Bush, and pretty much 2/3 of the ads Obama ran linked Bush to McCain, McCain
Sure.
to Bush.
I mean that's
If there's an
half of a
unpopular
presidential
president,
campaign.
yes.
That's absolutely half of it. But Obama also ran on healthcare reform. He had a positive agenda.
So one of my favorite things about the Obama, people forget about the Obama 2008 campaign. Everyone thinks of it as like this very positive campaign. He literally ran a higher percentage of negative ads than any presidential candidate in history. Okay. That was an exceptionally negative campaign. 2012 was the same. They ran against Mitt Romney as, as rapacious capitalist, and it worked. So I'm just saying that negative partisanship, negative campaigning, at least the last few cycles, has been shown to be very successful. I don't know why Democrats who can be successful in 2026 and 28 with the same message, which is an anti-Trump message. I mean, again, I keep coming back to this. People just don't seem to recognize the fact that Donald Trump is exceptionally unpopular. He is the most unpopular first-term president in American history. Actually, I shouldn't say that. The only one more unpopular, I believe, was Trump in his first term. He is incredibly unpopular. His policies are incredibly unpopular. And I just think that is the key. And I think you take a clue from what Mills, the campaign message she's putting out there. Again, the people who wrote that video for her know more about politics and have the main electorate than you and I do. And their conclusion was the best message is not, here's my healthcare agenda, right? Here's my economic agenda. It's, I am going to stop Donald Trump. That's what plays. And again, a place like Maine, which Kamala Harris won by 7 points in 2024, seems like a pretty good message.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Look, negative politics always works. Okay, voters tell pollsters they hate it, but
It's
all
not
you have to
true.
do is look at, and this is not a new thing. This is not an Obama thing ushered in something. This is not Trump. I mean, George Herbert Walker Bush ran the nastiest, dirtiest campaign in the history of America, maybe in 1988, and it worked.
Did
Okay,
work.
and they did that because their polling early in the campaign cycle said voters don't like you, so make them hate the other guy more, as
Right.
opposed to give them a reason to like you. I think that the combination, the sweet spot in American politics is you run a very negative campaign. Well, first of all, keeping your candidate a little bit above that, just a little bit, not completely, and having one signature policy initiative that every voter knows about by the end of the campaign, because there's only one, and you hammer it home
I,
and you say, "I will do this to make your life better." This one thing.
I mean, look, I think that's all well and good. I don't know that it makes that much of a difference. I really do think that this
It
comes down
may
to being
be.
negative. And I will say this: you're right. Like Maine is different than Texas, for example. I mean, Democrats should win the seat to me. I know Susan Collins has defied gravity for a very long time, but she is exceptionally vulnerable. She is not popular. Trump is not popular. You've got a really good candidate, even though she's 77 years old with Janet Mills, but she is a two-term governor. She's won statewide election. She has an approval rating that is above water. I just think that that is the best person you have to run against that race. That's the best chance for a pickup. The second best place is probably North Carolina, where Roy Cooper is running against a Republican, not an incumbent because Tom Tillis is retiring. That's the other place too. I don't know that Democrats can pick up any more than those two seats. Maybe in Ohio if things go right for Sherrod Brown, but I would, honestly, if I were to judge that race now, I think you'd have to say the lean Republican seat. Maybe in Iowa because we don't know who the Republican nominee is going to be. Had it been Joni Ernst, I actually would have liked Democrats' chances more. I like
Yeah,
them less.
Hinson's a
Uh,
better candidate.
yeah, I mean, Ernst was the reason. I think the reason. I mean, I don't know. I assume when he dropped out was that she probably was, not a shoe in to get reelected. Texas. Look, Texas always reminds me of like great De Gaulle line about Brazil. It's the future, and it always will be. Right? It's the future of democratic politics. It's the future of blue state, and always will be. The only chance Democrats have to win in Texas and flip that seat is if Ken Paxton is the Republican nominee. And even then, I'm not sure it's enough for them to win. But that's the only way it's going to happen is if Ken Paxton, who is a walking, uh, you know, Oppo researcher's dream, is the nominee. But that's basically it as far as real pickup. Maybe Louisiana if Kennedy, if
No,
what's his name,
Edwards
Edwards
said
runs.
yesterday he's not
He's not
running.
running. Okay, well then that's not going to
I
happen.
I would throw Alaska into that
Alaska is a good
as a
one too.
possibility,
Mary Peltola
but
is an interesting candidate. She already won statewide once.
and it wouldn't shock me if another Farm Belt state, there's usually a state that pops onto the map in the fall of the election year. Like 2014, it was Kansas. The Democrats didn't actually win. But for the Republicans, it was Colorado that everyone had thought was safe, and all of a sudden they ended up winning that seat. There's always, a seat that pops onto the map. It wouldn't shock me if the tariffs go in a certain direction, that there's a Farm Belt seat, whether it's, I think South Dakota is up this cycle, if I remember correctly. But like something South Dakota, Nebraska, something pops onto the map last minute because people are really, really mad about the tariffs. That wouldn't shock me. But otherwise, you're right. That's the playing field. And look, the thing with Maine that people forget about Collins is she's actually been exceptionally lucky. She was elected in
Yeah,
96, which was a year that people split their tickets.
yeah.
Clinton at the top, Republicans for Congress. She was reelected in 2002, which is only the third midterm ever that the president's party gained seats in the House. So it was an anomaly. '08, she beat back the Obama wave, but that was the only time she's had an incredibly bad cycle to run. 2014 was a big Republican midterm.
I know 20
20
wasn't a great cycle. 20 was not a great cycle. She should
it
have
was
lost
not
in
a
20.
great cycle, but it
She should
was
have lost
not,
in 20.
Republicans gained in the House. It was not like they won the House vote nationwide. It wasn't like a wave election.
That's true.
Biden
That's
did
true.
really well, but
But but
she had,
but Susan Collins was the only Republican to win in a state where Trump lost, and don't forget Trump lost by
yeah,
9 points to Biden
yeah.
in Maine in 2020, and she still won, and she was basically behind in every single poll. I think just she had a crap. Sarah Gideon was a crappy opponent. The thing is about Maine, though, I think I will say, and this is what I think is sort of funny. I keep seeing all these progressives who are sort of like, we need to win, we need to stop Trump, we need to, elect uh, uh, you know, electable Democrats, moderate Democrats. And then you have like this two-term governor who's a moderate, and all the progressives are out there saying, wait a minute, we should like this oyster fisherman who's literally never run for elected office before. I'm sure Graham Platter is a very nice guy. And if he beats Mills, then he's a good politician. But on paper, this isn't a close call. Getting Mills on the ticket is such a win for Democrats. She is the much more likely to beat Collins in next year than Graham Platter.
Okay, so we're getting into the primary segment of things, and there's
Primary
a lot
segment,
of things we
yes.
have to say on this. Okay,
Yes.
but here's my thing, and it's not just the progressives, by the way. I saw Dan Pfeiffer, the former Obama aide, and I think came from Tom Daschle at one point. He was saying that Mills probably shouldn't have run. That we have Plattner yesterday, and I think here's the thing about this: Graham Plattner has a very high ceiling. He's done some impressive things
Yeah.
in a different state where you have no bench. Because I saw people making Raphael Warnock comparisons, and if the difference is Raphael Warnock was the best candidate Democrats could get in 2020 in Georgia. Why? Because they had no statewide elected officials. They
Yeah.
had a small congressional delegation, including no like swing seat. Well, they had one swing seat from the Atlanta suburbs, but like they didn't have any statewide elected officials that they could run. Okay, and so then you roll the dice. It's the old John McCain blow on your hand, roll the dice thing. Graham Plattner could be great. Every so often, you get people who come along, or not even every so often, every few election cycles, you get somebody who comes along who's really skilled and really talented, who's never won anything, and ends up becoming a star. The catch is, you don't know that at this point of the election cycle. You have no idea. And for
No,
every
no
one
way.
of those people that comes along, there's another person who gets really hyped and looks great on paper and then flops as a candidate. And the risk here is Janet Mills has been through debates. Janet Mills has been through contested elections. Voters know her.
She's held elected office
Yeah,
in Maine for 35 years. She was not elected attorney general. She had 4 terms. She was appointed by the state legislature, but she has been in the public uh realm, in public office since 1980.
yeah.
More or less for a small period where she
She's
wasn't.
road tested. She is a known commodity. The thing with Graham Plattner is he could be amazing, or he could fall on his face. He could get into a debate. He's never been in a political debate before, right? He can
No.
get in a debate. The studio lights are on, and he could freeze up Jan Brewer style for 10 seconds. If you don't remember, she was the governor. She was in the ascended to the governorship of Arizona, and then during a political debate, just froze for like 10 seconds. Um,
That's a deep cut.
okay,
It's a
I
deep
see
cut right
people
there, Brian.
saying,
It's a very deep cut.
I see people in the
You could have
chat.
gone Rick. You could have gone Rick Perry, and instead you went Jan Brewer. I'm very
I could
impressed. Very
either
impressed.
or. They were my two examples. Um, okay, I see people saying in the chat, longer tenure doesn't make a better candidate. We don't want establishment anymore. I get the impulse for change and younger candidates. Look, if this race were Jared Golden and Janet Mills, it would be no comparison. You
No
want the
comparison.
younger,
You want
been
Golden.
in office less
Yes.
interesting background guy. What we're saying here is that the guy with no experience at all, who's never run a campaign, could very easily turn out to be a disaster.
Yeah.
He could be great. And I am all for change. To be on the record, have been saying for a year and a half that I wasn't or not a year and a half, a year at this point. I really wasn't comfortable Janet Mills as a nominee. She's the going to be the oldest freshman senator in American history. She's already taken a one-term pledge,
Yeah, which is smart.
um, which is smart. But like, I do think politics should get younger. However, once Jared Gold decided not to run, once every what should we call them, nepo babies? Uh, by which I mean Angus King's son, Chili
Right,
Pingree's daughter, they
right.
all decided they'd rather have a 20-way primary for governor instead of running against Collins.
I don't know
Once
why.
we got to that point that nobody with name recognition or track record was running, Janet Mills became the best option.
Look,
Or let me phrase it this way, Michael, and then I'll let you jump in here. It's I have no problem with Graham Plattner not standing down for Janet Mills.
no, he should
Okay,
not. He should run. He should run against
I
her.
mean, he should run,
Absolutely.
but I also think that what's ludicrous about the Plattner people is they think Janet Mills, the two-term governor, should stand down for a guy who's never won a race for dog catcher.
It's insane. I mean, I literally saw that argument yesterday, and I was like, "Are you absolutely kidding me?" Look, here's the bottom line: Democrats have zero margin for error. There are a handful of seats. There are two seats where they could be favored, or they could certainly have an advantage. That's North Carolina and Maine. Okay, you have to nominate the best, most electable candidate. Okay, and that is Janet Mills. I'm taking nothing. Look, at Platinum beats in the primary, you know,
Great.
go with God. I mean, he's clearly a good politician if he can do that. So I say do it. But on paper, getting Mills in the race is a win for Democrats. Now let me pivot here. This is podcasting pivoting right here. You talk about wanting a younger Democrat. Maine's not the place because you have to win Maine, and it's a basically a purple, slightly lean blue state. The place where you can do it is just north of Maine in Massachusetts, where today
Oh,
Congressman
and
Seth
now I'm
Moulton.
gonna go.
Well, no. Hear me out here. Congressman Seth Moulton, okay, announced a primary challenge to Ed Markey. Now, Ed Markey is 79 years old. Thank you, Elizabeth, by the way. Markey is 79 years old. Poor Ed Markey, by the way. The guy gets a primary challenge 6 years ago from Joe Kennedy III. He beats that off. Now he has another one. I would say this, though. He is much more vulnerable on this one. And look, if you want to elect younger Democrats, do it in places where you're not going to put the party at risk in the general election. And if it's Moulton, if it's Markey, if it's my dog is the Democratic nominee in Massachusetts, they're going to win the Senate race. Okay. Baxter for Senate. That's what I would say. They're going to win the Senate race because this is a blue state. So, Moulton's 46, I think, or 44. Markey's 79. And by the way, a lot of people in Massachusetts do not want him to run for re-election. About, I think, only 36%. The last poll I saw wanted to run for re-election. I think he's in real trouble here, and I would not be shocked if he doesn't even if he drops out because this is going to be a tough race against Moulton.
So on the one hand, I think Ed Markey should retire.
Yeah,
But I
I
was
agree.
talking to my subscribers at the World According to Brian, and you should follow, subscribe to both of us. Truth and Consequences, the World According to Brian. We've
You
we've
should
reached our
subscribe.
10-second infomercial
That's
portion
right.
of
That's
the
right.
show. But I think Ed Markey should retire. I was talking for my with my subscribers yesterday about a house race in Connecticut that was annoying me. Luke Bonin is the challenger. I think he was the mayor of Hartford or is the mayor of Hartford. But what annoying me about this race, he's challenging John Larson, who I think is 77 or 78, veteran congressman.
Yeah.
And I think Larson should retire. My issue with these primaries is Bonin had one of the largest fundraising numbers of any Democrat who has reported already, over $1 million
Wow.
for the quarter. And what annoys me about these primaries is, yeah, I think these people should retire and pass the baton to the next generation. But if they don't, now if you have these big, messy, contested primaries, you are pulling donor dollars,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
energy out of swing districts, swing states, places where Democrats can be fighting Republicans and expending those resources against people like Ed Markey and John Larson, who have voted right for decades, who are good, solid, constructive members of Congress, whose only sin is that they've aged.
Yeah.
And I,
Yeah.
I
That's
I
fair.
would prefer that they not run again. I would prefer they pass the baton, but if they don't, I am not a I only like primaries in cases where you've got untested kinds of candidates. And we have that in a lot of the swing
Look,
districts.
I think it's a good point. I think, like in House races, you can say, look, if you don't run this time, you can run 2 years. You can run in 4 years. Look, in a Senate race, it's a little different. I mean, I actually am sympathetic to Moulton here because he wants to
Yeah.
do something other than being congressman. The only way he can do it is by knocking off Markey or Warren. Warren just got reelected last time, so she's not up for 6 more years. If you want to be a senator and not be a congressman the rest of your life, this is the way to do it. And I have no problem with Moulton doing it. It's a smart play. And again, like I said, it's not putting Democrats in danger. And I want to say one thing, though.
Right.
There's been a lot of criticism of the Democratic Party, of the Democratic establishment, of Chuck Schumer. But you got to say one thing: they have nailed the recruiting game for this election, right? They got Cooper in North
That's
Carolina, which
his
was a
best skill, by the way.
it is
Schumer.
actually, I think it is his best skill. I think well, he does other things well too, but that's a good skill he has. He got Cooper, he got Mills, he got Sherrod Browner in Ohio. And look, no guarantee that any three of them win, but certainly it's like a good manager. You've increased the likelihood that your team can prevail. And I think to that point, they've done a good job so far. On the House side, I haven't paid much attention to recruiting. It does seem as though they're doing a good job on the recruiting. And also, look, Republicans have a problem, which is that they have a lot of retirements and a lot of seats that
Well,
where they're running, people have never run for office before, or
so
never run for House office before.
2 points on that. One on the Republicans. I just want to clarify. You're right that they have seats opening up, like Arizona's first, where Dave Schweiker's running for governor. The difference is sometimes people point to retirements as a sign of like what the political environment is, and one thing that creates waves is people running for the exits because they don't want a competitive campaign.
Yeah,
Here it's been a little bit different. It's mostly people running for higher office, who are vacating those seats. So I don't want. We're not saying to you that the Republicans are retiring, which tells us for sure this is how the environment's going to be. But you're right that open seats are more susceptible. Democrats have had a really good, I think, recruiting cycle in the House, but it's different than your typical recruiting cycle. And I'm going to bring this up because you're going to see today is the reporting deadline, assuming that people actually follow it with the government close for fundraising numbers for the third quarter. And I think you're going to see a lot of narratives of Republicans have way more money in these key races.
yeah,
But one reason for that is that yes, I think the turbocharged Democratic fundraising of 2018 and 2020 has died down a little bit. However, one reason you're seeing that is in a lot of these races, they've recruited a bunch of interesting candidates who look good on paper, who are now in these primaries. I saw one of the open seats in Michigan, or maybe it was the seventh seat that Tom Barrett stole from the Democrats or won from the
right.
Democrats 2 years ago. But they've got like two or three candidates who've all raised $600,000 or $700,000 for the quarter, all of whom have interesting backgrounds. And you have a bunch of these places where I think the primaries are healthy. These are different from the ones I'm talking about, where you have an established Democrat whose only sin is age. These are places where you have a bunch of untested candidates, and I kind of want to let the best candidate win out. Um,
Yeah, yeah,
in so much as the party intercedes, it should be if there's someone who is unelectable in a general election who's starting to do well in a primary. That's when you say, okay, we want to make sure this person's not the one who comes out of the primary. They're too far to the left to win. But otherwise, I think it's a healthy thing to have a bunch of people who are enthusiastic about serving their country running. And let's see, is it the former ambassador? Is it the person with the
yeah,
military
yeah,
background?
yeah. I think that's fair.
I mean,
I
they
agree.
just got a smoke jumper into a race in Montana, who, I think it was military as well, but like interesting kind of character. So they've done pretty well in House recruiting, and it's just not like big name recognition type people like, oh, we've got state senator so and so. It's more people who have the kind of interesting backgrounds who did really well in 2018, that kind of candidate. And there are a bunch of them in a lot of different races.
Can I just? I want to pick up on something that one of the participants here made mention in the chat. Larry Simon, longtime reader, Chief of Consequences. Thanks, Larry. And he brings up this issue that he thinks that the sending of the National Guard out to blue cities is preposition them for 2026. Um, and if the polling looks bad, that you might see these troops try to interfere with the election. I'm less concerned about that, and I actually kind of think that if that happens, I think it actually is probably politically a win for Democrats. I just think that the best way to get Democrats out to the polls is to try to intimidate them to not vote. I do, and I mean you see this in New York now, where Trump is basically threatening to to withhold money from New York if Mamdani is elected mayor, which I'm sure both things are going to happen. He's going to win, and Trump will try to, you know, withhold money. That is only a win for Mamdani, right? I mean, that is politically it's going to help him. It makes it seem like Trump is basically siding with Andrew Cuomo. So I'm not overly concerned about that, and I actually think if Republicans try to do it, I think it probably boomerangs against them um, more than it hurts. And look, I see your point about the voting machine and so forth. I always feel like these are kind of red herrings that always get raised, and I don't know that it's really they're significant issues. You know, elections are state run; they're not run by the federal government. The ability for the federal government to interfere in elections is limited. I'm just not overly concerned about it. And like I said, I think that the more likely scenario is that these kind of efforts, these ham-handed efforts by the Trump administration, help Democrats. So, by the way, I want to mention one more because you mentioned Michigan. That interesting Senate race there. Also, you got three Democratic candidates: Mallory McMorrow, Abdul Saeed, I think
Al
it pronounced
Saeed, I think.
is Saeed, and Haley Stevens. You know, Stevens is the one who's being supported by the DSCC, which makes perfect sense.
Implicitly.
She's implicitly, yes, she is the moderate. And I know there are some issues with Stevens, not a perfect candidate, but she is a much more moderate Democrat. McMorrow came out was it a week or two ago, in the most ham-handed uh, way possible, called what's happening in Gaza a genocide, which, first of all, felt unbelievable, completely calculated on her part. And secondly, was a really strange political move because what it ended up doing was Saeed is also the other candidate, is much more to the left of either one of these two, has said the same thing. So basically, you're dividing the genocide camp between these two candidates while you're leaving the rest of particularly the Jewish voters in Michigan, to Stevens. So I just thought it was a really, really stupid political move on her part. And again, I think this is an example where, is Haley Stevens a perfect candidate? No. Is she the one most likely to win statewide? Probably. I mean, McMorrow's claim to fame, to her credit, by the way, is that she came out in support of trans kids, a very well-known, sort of famous speech she gave at the Michigan State Legislature a couple of years ago. I don't know if that's a winning message for a statewide race. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. I just think that, look, Michigan's going to lean blue. But again, you have no margin for error. You've got to win every one of these races. Democrats have to win in Michigan. And so, to my mind, you elect the candidate who is the most moderate, who's the most electable, who's got the widest appeal. You cannot take risks.
I
Take a risk in Massachusetts because you're going to win anyway, but not in a place like Michigan.
I slightly disagree with you in Michigan. I agree with the philosophy. I think McMurrow is a generational talent politically. Her videos
Really?
are amazing. She's out there doing brewery tours, talking with average voters. The Gaza issue caught her because she was getting hammered because her husband had some association with APAC. Um, and she basically Michigan, the politics of that are weirder than they are anywhere else because there's a huge Arab and Muslim population
Right.
that swung very hard to Trump in 2024. But generally speaking, I like both Stevens and McMurrow and made the best one win. I think if Al Saeed wins, I think Republicans will win that seat. I think he's
Maybe.
completely unelectable. We're talking about a guy who on October 7th sent out a fundraising email about the genocide in Gaza,
Yeah.
and is that tone deaf. So I think either or wins. Again, I threw this out a couple of weeks ago. Republicans have won one Senate race in Michigan since 1972.
Yeah, right. That's right.
I really don't think in an off year that this
But
is a particularly competitive race.
But all I'm saying is that Democrats have no margin for error. This is the point that people keep
Right,
making,
right,
that
right.
we've got very few seats you have to win every seat that is a lean blue seat. You can't take any chances. And I just think that in this situation, you can't take a chance. And I think that's the bottom
Well,
line
my
for
only thing is
Democrats.
with McMurrow is much more charismatic. Stevens is very dry and very boring and generates no energy.
Yeah, but
I
I'll
have
just
no
say,
problem with her, but I don't know that someone who's dull as like watching paint dry kind of thing is necessarily great for a viral
I
environment.
mean, Gary Peters is not exactly the most
No,
scintillating human being on the
you're
face of
right.
the earth. So, I'll put
You're
that
right.
out
I mean,
there.
again, I have no problem with Haley Stevens. If Mallory McMurrow had not run, I would enthusiastically be supporting Haley Stevens. I just think for me, it's anyone but Al Sayed out of that primary.
Yeah, I think
and
that's right.
we
I think
win
that's
the
right.
seat.
I think that's right. Okay, so let's talk about what is sort of this hidden minefield, not for 2026 so much, but maybe 2028, which is the case being discussed in the Supreme Court today that would basically eviscerate the Voting Rights Act.
It seems like the Voting Rights Act is dead based on oral arguments
Although
this
it's
morning.
really odd because, the a couple of years ago, it was this court, this particular ideological configuration of the court, that kind of saved the Voting Rights Act and actually gave Democrats a couple of winnable seats in Louisiana and Alabama. And the argument, by the way, that they're going to use to get rid of the Voting Rights Act, and this is just, I mean, this is where we are in America right now, is that having the Voting Rights Act to basically assist black uh, um, uh, black congressional candidates to win is discriminatory against white people. That's basically the argument that's being made here. I am a little bit suspicious. I'm not so convinced that they will completely eviscerate the VRA, but I certainly can imagine that scenario with this court. You could put nothing past them. But I do want to say one thing I think that's being a little bit over interpreted about this situation. There was an article in Slate a couple of days ago and a few other places that said that 19 Democratic seats could be up for grabs. That is a wild exaggeration. Okay. You have 19 seats that arguably are affected by the Voting Rights Act, but you're talking about places like Georgia and North Carolina that are basically toss up states. I mean, if you take away Voting Rights Act protections or take away, majority black districts in Mississippi and Louisiana, yeah, you're going to get more Republican candidates. I'm not so sure it's the case in Georgia and North Carolina. And I also, there are some downsides to this. You do have to put Democrats in place where Republicans usually win, and you do create some more vulnerable Republicans as a result. It's also the case none of this is going to happen in 2026. If it happens, it'll happen in 2028 because you can't, unless the court decides in the next couple of days, which that doesn't seems unlikely. You're going to pass deadlines in November and December for these districts to be drawn. And so if it plays out, it almost certainly will play out in 2028. And then who knows what happens then as far as if Democrats can win the House in 2026, what they're able to do on this issue, how they're able to, maybe amend the Voting Rights Act. Who knows? I just think it's a concern. I'm not trying to minimize it. It's a major concern, but I do think the impact is probably more down the road than it is in next year.
I think that's right. What essentially is going to happen is I think they're going to ban majority minority districts, which has been this mechanism to allow black communities to guarantee that they get to have representation in Congress. Because what will happen when they hand this down, the reason I'm reasonably confident we're headed in this direction is Roberts tried to distinguish during oral arguments this case from the Alabama case where he saved the Voting Rights Act a couple of years ago.
Right.
And Kavanaugh was talking about how every part of the Voting Rights Act implicitly had a sunset, that this was supposed to end at a certain point. The consideration of race, which is the exact language that they used when they were getting rid of affirmative action, by the way.
Right.
Um,
Also, kind
and
of Shelby County too, right? I mean,
yeah,
Roberts
yeah,
basically
exactly.
discrimination is
Things
not as
have
big an issue it
changed.
used to be. Yeah, right. Things have
And
changed.
it
Yeah,
drives me crazy because 6 years before Shelby County, George W. Bush stood up there and proudly signed an extension of the Voting Rights Act and explained he got the history right, unlike the boobs on the court, that this was what unlocked the ballot box for African Americans and actually made the 15th Amendment come to life
yeah.
was the Voting Rights Act and some of these provisions. I think the 19 estimate, I think you're right that the 19 estimate is extreme. What I've seen subsequently, Nate Cohen had a good analysis in the Times on this today, is somewhere between 6 and 12 seats. And that's in addition to the redistricting Republicans are already doing that we'll update you on
Right.
momentarily. Okay, but it's 6 to 12 seats that Republicans will gain from this. I do think it's probably 2028. I say probably instead of definitely, because really the ball is in the court of the state legislatures. If the court were to decide, let's just say January or February, which is probably not
But
super likely.
that's super unlikely. These things usually happen in April or May, right? I mean, it'd be very
Well,
unlikely.
the reason I say it's only somewhat unlikely is that there's usually a bigger case or two from the first month of the term, which is October, that gets decided in the winter. Some of them get strung out to June. And if I were the court, quite frankly, if I wanted to avoid massive amounts of criticism for being hacks, I would wait until June. So it
Right.
didn't look like I was trying to tip the midterms. And if it is a 2028 issue, and Democrats have a good 2026, they can offset this if they get trifectas in places like Minnesota, where they can
Right.
redistrict more seats themselves. But we should look at the totality of this whole picture, which is, let's just say that we're somewhere in the middle of that 6 to 12 range on this. Let's just say it's 9, which is not 19, but it's still a
Right.
significant number of seats. Republicans are probably going to gain a net of 10 seats from redistricting in the 2026 cycle. So they
I
didn't gain.
that seems very high to me. I'm going to push back on that. That seems very high.
Okay, so let me show my math. Okay, there is one seat in North Carolina that's going to get ripped
Yes.
away next week.
Right.
Okay, there is one in Missouri that, unless Democrats can get a referendum on the ballot, is gone, which is 2 in Kansas City. There are 5 in Texas, is 7. There is JD Vance went to Indiana on Friday to try to sell the legislature, which would be 9. Is 2 more if they redistrict
I
in
thought it was
Indiana.
one more. I thought it was one more in Indiana.
No, they want to go big. They want to take out both Gary and Indianapolis, both
Okay.
seats.
Okay.
So that would be 9 is their goal there. Florida, I've seen estimates of 3. Is the thing. Now in Kansas, they just allocated money. They need 4 of the last 8 state representatives, Republican state representatives, who have not signed on to their special session already to sign on. And if they do, they're going to try to redistrict Sharice David out of her district,
Right.
centered around the suburbs, or centered around Kansas City and the suburbs
Right.
there. So that puts you at like 13 Republican seats, and there's something else. There was another state that I'm blanking on,
Ohio. Ohio.
Ohio. There's 3 more.
Yep.
Um, so that gets you there, and that assumes that no other Republican legislatures get prodded by Trump. There's been some discussion of South Carolina, and one thing that I think you have a risk on with the Supreme Court is they've now set the signal. So I wonder if some of these Republican
It could
state
be.
legislatures
Could
get
be.
frisky and say, okay, let's see the courts stop us.
Right.
We're going to do this preemptively. And Democrats really just have California, because Hakeem Jeffries was on a conference call with the Illinois delegation yesterday trying to swing them on trying to get one more seat out of the state. And the delegation is really resistant. In Maryland, they have a state court issue that
So
is a
I
real
gotta say,
problem.
but Maryland and Illinois are both doable, and I would kind of speculate that if Indiana and maybe Kansas move forward, that you might see more a push by Illinois or Maryland to do something.
In
I mean, the Calif
Illinois, my understanding is there are a couple of Democrats who are afraid they will lose if
right.
they lose
That's the
blue
concern.
areas, that
That's
they've
the
already
concern.
maximalized this gerrymander at 14 to 3. Maryland, they have an issue that Larry Hogan appointed a lot of the state Supreme Court, and a Democratic judge already threw out their first attempt at getting rid of Andy Harris 3 years ago. But yeah, it's possible that they move.
But okay, let me push back on 2 points here. One, you forgot Utah, by the way, where you could see 2 seats that could
Okay, yes, but there was a new development in that this morning that I was not aware of, which is Republicans are now trying to get enough signatures to
yes,
force a ballot
referendum.
initiative
Yeah, ballot
to.
initiative, right.
It's not because they think they're going to win, but because it would push it off to 2028.
Right, right. So we'll see if that happens or not. In the meantime, you also have California, where I
Right,
mean,
right, right.
I've seen 5 seats. I think it could go higher than 5 seats actually, and it looks like, based on what I'm reading, and this is Punchbowl has been, actually, to its credit, been covering this pretty exhaustively, and they're basically taking the view like that Democrats are very confident, Republicans are very
Yeah.
not confident.
No, I think they win.
I think they win in California. Something else about 2020 worth mentioning is that New York cannot redistrict this cycle, but they can do it for 2028, and there you would have potentially 4 or 5 seats as well that could be flipped.
New
Um,
York, New Jersey, Colorado, Virginia, Minnesota. I have a whole list. And I think the Democrats in those places, some of them they have to unwind independent commissions, like
yeah,
Colorado. But like
that's what they're trying to do in New York.
in New York. But like Jared Polis in Colorado has said nothing about this. I think he's going to come under immense amounts of pressure
Yeah, I
to do
agree.
something for 2028 if they, or actually they're going to have a new governor, Michael Bennett. Should be the governor, the
Probably.
sitting U.S. senator. But like, I think that those places, I'm not worried as much for 2028. The where I got that 10 number is all those states I was adding up minus the 5 in
Right.
California. I think Democrats do it in California. They're just hamstrung because what Democrats did in a lot of these places is when they gained control, they passed these independent redistricting committees because they had been
Yeah, they've
locked
screwed
out by
themselves.
Republican
They screwed themselves.
gerrymanders.
Right.
They said, okay, we want to prevent ourselves from being gerrymandered out again and get fair maps. And what they ended up doing is they didn't realize that if Republicans went maximalist, that
Right.
they need these places to respond, and they're going to have to unwind these commissions. And they're also having to contort themselves into
So
pretzels to say, well, we said these commissions were the good democracy thing, and now we have to undo that. But
there's a couple of things I want to point out about this too. I mean, look, the 10 number seems high, but that's subtracting California and probably, I guess, it's saying Utah doesn't happen. I mean, that is certainly a possibility. I think you want to consider the possibility too that especially places like Florida and to some extent North Carolina is that if you do redistrict, you also put Republicans who were in relatively safe seats in a vulnerable position. And if this is a wave election, you're actually potentially putting some Republicans at risk. So I guess 10 is on the high end, but certainly there's no guarantee it goes that high. And even like a 10 is a lot, but you're talking about Democrats need to flip, what, is it 3 seats now? Something like that?
yes,
So, I think the likelihood of 3 seats is pretty high. 13 would be more difficult, but certainly still doable.
so
Um, but yeah, go ahead.
I
Sorry.
I think that analysis is right. I think that I'm I used to think that Republicans risk what they call dummy manders more than I do today. And a dummy mander is what Michael's talking about, which is you've gerrymandered to such an extent that you put your own people at risk in waves because their districts are not safe enough.
Right.
I was much more convinced of that. A lot of the data gurus have convinced me, and mapping gurus over the last couple of months, that you can actually, because the Supreme Court has basically said anything goes, you
Yeah.
can draw districts with such precision now that you can basically make it impossible to dummy mander. That being said, I think you're right that they could cost themselves, one or two seats here or there, where they overreach and they expose people where they end up with bad candidates, something like that. The big thing for me, and this actually gets at what you were talking about National Guard or ICE agents or things and trying to influence elections. The person in the chat weighed in on, which is right now, Democrats, even if you assume that Republicans, let's say, gain 5, 6 seats, right now, through redistricting, Democrats can gain a majority in the House just by winning in blue states, in
Yeah.
states controlled by Democrats,
Yes.
okay, where they control the apparatus, where there's no opportunity for any chicanery, there's no opportunity for voter intimidation, where Democrats control the process. If you get to the point where um, Republicans can maximize their redistricting gains, you start to have to push into purple or red territory
Yeah.
in
Sure.
terms of winning the House. It's not impossible, but it introduces new complications. It could create problems. But right now, I still say at the moment, Democrats are strong favorites to take the House, though it's a much cloudier situation than it was a year ago before Republicans hit on this whole
A
redistricting
hundred
thing.
percent. No, no, I agree with that 100%. Look, if not for the redistricting that was going on, this wouldn't be a close call, right? We would basically, I mean, you have a deeply unpopular president. Approval ratings in the low 40s. You've got a very energized Democratic Party. You have a Democratic base that is increasingly made up of frequent voters. I mean, you're already seeing this in special elections. Democrats aren't just winning, they're dominating, overperforming to an enormous degree in these special elections. I mean, all of it bodes well for 2026. And look, there's a reason Republicans are doing this because they know they can't win otherwise and they know they'll lose the House otherwise. Now,
Right. I mean,
it
if they had done no redistricting, our home state of Pennsylvania alone could have delivered Democrats the majority. That's where
absolutely.
we were.
Absolutely. Right. I mean, Pennsylvania, there's like 2 or 3 seats that are probably up for
Four.
grabs. Four, excuse
Competitive
me.
seats. So one in Scranton. Scott Perry, the former head of the Freedom
Are you
Caucus, even
including
though
the guy in Bucks County,
yeah,
Fitzpatrick?
Fitzpatrick is the more of
He's
the
never going to
reach.
lose. He's
He's
never going to lose.
the fourth race, but he's more of the reach. But there's one in Allentown. Actually, this was actually funny. Susan Wild, who was the former congresswoman who lost by less than 1% in
Right.
2024, went after Janet Mills yesterday. She said, "I decided not to run again because I'm like 69, and I guess I was wrong. But I have like a whole nother decade or something like that in Twitter.
That's
But
a
that
that's a
seat
cheap shot.
in Allentown is the third one, and Scranton, Paige Conetti is a really good young former mayor of Scranton, who raised $600,000 in her first month or
Right.
so in the race against Rob Bresnan. So there are like four competitive seats in Pennsylvania
So
alone.
you got a bunch in New York as well. I mean,
You got
Mike
three in
Lawler,
Michigan.
three in Michigan. Well, three in Michigan. Yeah, I at least two, but yeah, maybe three in Michigan. Certainly
The
in
third is
Wisconsin.
Bill Huizenga out in Western Michigan.
That's why I
Here's the
was like that's why I thought that was a bit
okay.
of a stretch.
So let me throw my theory out here because this is a theory of midterms. There
Okay.
are two guys who embody this cycle: Bill Huizenga in Michigan and Rob Whitman in Virginia. What you're looking for in midterms, to me, in waves, for those guys who don't look all that at risk today, but end up losing.
Yeah.
And we're not quite getting what we used to. You go back to like 94 or 2006, you had people who literally were never mentioned at being at risk or were not mentioned until like the last week who lost. We haven't
Yeah.
seen that as much in recent elections. But what you looking for is districts where the president's party's performance has been going down
Okay. And
over
that's the
election
case. And
cycles.
yes, yes,
And that's true in both Western Michigan and Whitman's district is like not I don't exactly know the geography of where it is. It's not Norfolk. It's coming off of Richmond, I think, in some way, shape, or form. But in both districts, the Republican performance is going down and down and down. And then you look for incumbents who have never had to run a tough race. Both
sure.
Whitman and Isaiah fit that description, whose political skills may be rusty, who may not be used to facing a tough challenge. And those are the kinds of races that get swept up in waves, in my view.
Right. And
Um,
I see you're also including the John James seat in Michigan. I think it's 10.
it's James's open seat.
Oh, he's
That
not
the
running, right? Because he's
Democrats,
running for governor. That's right.
that's
That's
right,
right.
that seat is open. He's their gubernatorial
And
nominee,
he
and that's
never
a
should have
seat.
won. If Democrats nominated a better candidate in
Oh,
2022, they would have won that seat.
I am about to hammer Andy Levin. Andy
Andy
Levin
Levin,
it is
oh man,
he
seriously,
gave up his seat
gave up his
with the new
seat
map to primary challenge Haley Stevens, who you
and
mentioned
lost.
before, and lost that primary because he claimed his district wasn't winnable. And then a really bad Democrat named Carl Marlinga ran.
Who was like 85 years old.
He lost by like 1,800 votes or 900
Yeah, he
votes, some
barely lost that
small
race.
amount.
Barely lost.
Where
Yeah,
Andy Levitt, with the last name that is political gold in Michigan, would have won
Carl Levin's
easily.
son. Yeah,
Yeah, and like that seat should never have flipped. No, I think it's his nephew. I don't think I think it's
I thought.
Sander Levin's son,
Oh,
the
you're
brother
right.
who was
You're
the
right. You're right.
congressman.
You're right. That's right. You're right. It's
But
nephew.
like
You're right.
dad was a longtime congressman, uncle was a longtime senator. He would have won running away, and yet he didn't want to take a tough race on and lost. But like there's that district plus Tom Barrett's district plus the Huizenga district
Right.
in Michigan.
And then there's like
Um,
Derek Van Orden in Wisconsin is one of the more vulnerable Republicans. He's
he
very
is
extreme as Republican, and he's
well,
gone more
not only is he
extreme.
very extreme, he's very intemperate. Gets
Yes.
drunk and like screams at kids
Yes.
and
He's
stuff like that.
not a nice man.
Not
Don
a
ba-
nice man. And
Don
by the
Bacon's
way,
seat in Nebraska is almost certainly going to switch hands, I would
I
think.
want to rip him in 1 second, but I want to tout Van Orden's challenger. Rebecca Cook ran one of the best races of last cycle. She is a really unique candidate in that she unifies moderates like me and leftists like Bernie, who has endorsed her. She's a diner waitress who dramatically overperformed Harris. She's charismatic, she's populist and blue collar, but she's also moderate, and fits the district well. Really great candidate. Is almost certainly going places if she wins this seat. Bacon was out there saying that Congress has handed its power over to the president yesterday
And
and
he's
lamenting that. And I'm
doing
like,
nothing to
how about
stop it.
you do something about it,
How
Don?
about do something? Yeah, I know. Crazy notion.
But that seat is out there. There are three competitive seats in Iowa.
Yeah,
Um,
Iowa is a real okay. Iowa's a really interesting situation because if you look at what happened in 2022, some of those races were decided. I mean, I think one was like less than 1,000 votes, or like wait, no,
I'll
less
go
than a
better.
hundred, less than 100 votes
No, no,
actually.
no, no, no. You're talking about the Christina Bohannon, Marinette Miller Meeks, not the original MMM. That was Marjorie Margolis Mizvinsky for
Mezvinsky,
the
who
deep
also
cut.
lost.
But
Yeah,
you're talking
who's by
Marinette
the way, is a one point whose son is married to Chelsea Clinton.
Chelsea Clinton. Marjorie's a lovely person. We shared some office space for a while, and I actually took a class with her in college. But anyway, Marionette Miller Meeks is the luckiest person in Congress. Why is she the luckiest person? In her first race in 2020, she won a congressional race by no lie, 6 votes.
That's right.
Six. It
That's
was recounted and she won by 6 votes. Okay.
that's crazy.
Then this last cycle, 2024, her third election, she faced Christine Bohannon for the first or second time. Okay. And she won by 700 votes the second
Yeah.
time. The closest race in the country twice in 3 cycles. She is done. She is a terrible
I
politician.
mean, look, in a wave election, she's the first to go under the
Yeah,
water.
she,
There's
she
no
she's
question
getting
about it.
capsized. There's also an open seat. Or no, wait, Zach Nunn didn't run for governor, or he did. I can't remember
I think he is
if
running
they
for governor. I
is
thought
he
he was
running.
running.
I thought they discouraged him from getting in, but his seat in Des Moines is also a swing seat. He won in 22 and flipped that seat from a Democrat. That's the second one. The third one is
Oh, no, no,
Ashley
he's not
Hinson's
running.
running.
You're right. He's not running. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah,
But you're right. He's
Trump
not running.
leaned on him because they were worried
That's
that
right.
seat was
That's
gone if
right.
he ran.
That's right.
And the third seat is Ashley Hinson is running
Ashley
for
Hinton,
Senate.
who is running for Senate.
And the reason that we bring these 3 seats up is in the last wave with Trump as president in 2018, Democrats flipped all 3 of these seats.
Flipped all 3 seats.
So that is a definite possibility in Iowa. They've been redistricted some to make Hinson's district less amenable, I think, to Democrats a little bit. But it's not impossible Democrats could gain 3 in Iowa. In a lot of ways, Iowa is going to be the most interesting kind of epicenter of the midterms.
I totally agree with that. And in part because it's if Trump's trade war, if there's a backlash, I think you might feel it most dramatically in a place like Iowa because it is a place that is heavily affected, agriculture industry heavily affected by it. And you're talking about seats that have in the past gone to Democrats. So I do think you're right. I think it's a place where
There's a lot more muscle memory in Iowa of voting for Democrats. Obama won it by more than he won the nation in 2012. And as recently as 2018, they won 3 of the 4 House seats.
didn't I
And you have
think
a
didn't Kerry win in '04 too and Gore win 2000? I can't remember now if they
no.
no,
In fact,
but barely lost it. I think
no. Gore won in 2000.
Gore won in
Kerry
2000. Okay,
lost it in '04. Obama won it twice.
won it twice and by big
Democrats
margins.
won 5 out of 6 cycles from 92 to 2012 in Iowa. And it was thought of as a pretty blue state, and then Trump flipped it.
Right.
And has won it 3 times. But they have a great gubernatorial nominee in Rob Sand. And in the
Yes. Yes.
governor's race in 2018, they had a bad candidate who only lost by 3 points against an incumbent governor. And now you have an open seat and a good candidate. The Senate race, they have a lot of interesting on paper
Zach
candidates.
Walls is one of the candidates, right?
It's Zach Walls and Josh. Why am I blanking on the last? Josh Turk was a
That's right.
Paralympian. He's a Paralympian state senator, very interesting candidate. He's running. And the third guy, Nathan Sage, is like a union electrician and is also interesting. The Des Moines school chief who used to work for Michelle Obama, Jackie Norris, had a little bit of a problem crop up recently because ICE went after the superintendent she hired, who
That's
turned
right.
out to have a manufactured biography. And they didn't really do their diligence, which isn't a great look for a candidate. But they've got interesting candidates in that Senate race, whoever wins the primary. So Iowa's got 5 competitive races,
Yeah.
and
I
and
just
you're right, it's a state where the tariffs are going to hit hard.
Yeah, I guess I go back to this, but look, there's a lot of places we talk about that where you're not going to have to look. We may very well get some Republicans who are vulnerable, particularly as to wave election. But I think Iowa's a place where you could see interesting races up and down the ballot. And I want to just first of all, I wanted to thank everyone who's here. We passed 200 people on this. I really appreciate it. That's a great, and we're not seeing much drop off. And we will keep talking for a while because we can do this all day. So if you're still interested in what we're doing, please,
We're
we'll
only
keep trying.
limited by our phone batteries, really.
Exactly, which is I'm on 27%, but I will see if we can keep it going.
I'm at
Uh,
53, but
there you go. You're much better prepared than I was. If you're liking this, please do hit the like button. Please, that does help with the algorithm and helps gets us more attention. So please do that if you can. I want to bring up the what was that? Oh my God, what was I gonna talk to you about? There was something I wanted to bring up about not the oh, I'm sorry, the governor's races. So we have to talk a
oh,
quick conversation about New Jersey
New
and
Jersey.
Virginia. So I'm going to step back a second because I'm going to give my take on this, and this is like my overarching take. This morning, I went on to Kalshi, which I mentioned I think earlier, and I looked at this is the prediction market. And you can by the way bet on everything on Kalshi. It's kind of like a fun site. And I looked and see what was the odds on in for New Jersey and Virginia. And Virginia was like 91% for the Democrat, and in for New Jersey it was like 70 something. So prediction markets are imperfect, but I do kind of trust them a little bit. And until I see a major shift, I'm going to assume that Democrats have the advantage in both states. I want to mention one thing about New Jersey, though, that I think is interesting. Mikey Sherrill made a very interesting accusation against Jack Ciattarelli, basically blaming him for opiate deaths. It was kind of a harsh, slightly dubious attack. And I think some of the speculation was that she did this because she's feel like she's in trouble and she needs to uh, go more on the offensive. First of all, smart strategy. I mean, especially at this point in the election, go on the offensive. I also read
Michael
today.
is the Lee Atwater of Democratic
Well,
politics.
easy, easy. I don't fight dirty. I don't fight dirty. Okay, but I do think negative attacks do work, and I do think that they're effective. Something else I noticed, which is that Trump is trying to get involved in the Jersey race, which could be the best thing for Mikey Sherrill. I mean, the best thing for Sherrill. Look, this is an interesting race in the sense that if you are the Republicans, you want to make localize this race, right? You've had two-term Democratic governor. New Jersey not elected a single party for governor for three straight elections since the '60s. So, theoretically, historically, the race should favor Republicans. And the incumbent governor, sorry, Phil Murphy, is not incredibly popular. And I don't know that Cheryl is the strongest candidate of that. I mean, she's not terrible, but I don't think she's the strongest candidate. So he's trying to localize this. Of course, if you're Cheryl, you want to nationalize this. You want to make this about Trump. Although I haven't really noticed, I do feel like she is fighting this on maybe the wrong terrain, where she's like not as nationalizing this maybe as much as she probably should. But still, that's what she's going to want to do. So it's a question of like, which one is more effective. But my thing on this is like, okay, Republicans want to point out to the fact that in 2024, Trump overperformed New Jersey, didn't lose by all that much there. I don't think it matters all that much, to be honest. I mean, I think presidential elections are different, and you have at every cycle where Trump is run, you have voters who come out just to vote for Trump. Um, I think that this race should be won by Democrats. Cheryl should win this race, but I do think, and every poll, by the way, if you go back and look, I looked at the New York Times aggregator this before I came on the call. Every poll has Cheryl ahead except for one recent one has him tied, the one has Ciattarelli. One has Ciattarelli ahead. She should win this race. If she doesn't, should we draw a big conclusion about where Democrats stand going into 2026, or is this a New Jersey outcome, New Jersey centric outcome?
Okay, so 3 points on this. One, I think if she loses, and it's not impossible, Michael's pointing out about the polls, but infamously, I more in the loss of Bob Casey in the Senate last cycle after he led like every poll but
Every
one.
poll,
Echelon Insights poll like the last week that had him losing by 5, and that was it. And
but the
he was
polls were
ahead,
very close. The polls were very tight
but
in that race,
they
and he
they
lost
were
by like
close.
0.34% or something. I think
It was like point 0.2 or point
point 2.
0.1.
All right,
It was really, 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 really close. So like she could lose. And if she loses, I think actually it should send a lot of nervous shockwaves through Democrats, but only about New Jersey, not about the midterms.
yeah,
I think at that point it would be 2 consecutive gubernatorial elections that were not the blowouts that people expected. It would be Trump closer in 2024 than anyone expected. It would be Nellie Poo's district. She's a freshman congresswoman flipping from going for Biden by like 20 points to voting for Trump in a it's like mostly minority district in I think Newark. Um, I would be very worried about New Jersey if she loses, but I think it would be about uniquely New Jersey factors and demographics. And as I've said to you, in 2022, Democrats didn't do great in New Jersey, and they lost a seat there, and they lost a bunch of seats in New York. So some of this is about the New York media market and things happening in the New York
yeah.
media market. And I think that we can't nationalize off of that. So I would not be worried at a more broad level. But I want to make one other point about Mikey Sherrill. You brought this race up to me this morning, and I started thinking about it. Mikey Sherrill is the best argument for Janet Mills there is out there. And here's why I say that. Mikey
Okay.
Sherrill looks great on paper. She's a fighter pilot who is a mother for a young candidate, won a swing congressional race in 2018, and that seat then got redistricted to be more blue so that her last like two races have been much easier. But she's been an uneven candidate. She's stuck her
Yeah.
foot in the mouth a little bit. She's said some things she probably shouldn't say. She's proved to be a little bit uninspiring. And that's the risk with great on paper candidates who are untested.
Yeah.
She looks every bit as good as Graham Plattner, if not better, on paper. And she's proved to be somewhat of an underwhelming candidate under the
And
the
just to point out,
spotlight.
unlike Platter, she did win. She has one held elected office, and
And won
she
a
flipped a
yeah,
seat.
yeah, she flipped a seat. So she's more proven than he is, and is and has still been an uneven candidate because she's never faced this kind of scrutiny and attention before.
Right.
And never been, on the Breakfast Club, the radio show where I think she said she had to figure out how much money she had made from stocks or
Oh,
something. Like they were like,
that was a bad clip. It was a bad
that
clip.
was pretty cringy. And then there was one about clean energy that's really cringy as well. But like, so she's why you want the safest possible candidate in races that lean towards you. Whereas you take chances in places that lean against you, where hey, maybe we hit on the perfect candidate and we win a race. That's great. But you don't do this in places that lean towards you because it creates risk.
And
So
look at
I
her opponent, by the way, Citarelli. I mean, I believe he ran against Murphy 4 years ago. I
I know
think
this
he
is
did
third. This is three, I think. Third
third.
gubernatorial
So
election.
he is tested. Of course, that is also suggests that he has a ceiling, but he is a tested candidate as far as running for statewide office, and she is not. So you give some credit to her for that, I suppose. Although,
I think he lost a primary in 2017,
okay,
maybe. I'm using AI now to double check this answer. Um, but I do think Citarelli is eh, I have this rule, Michael, where I think that um basically, you lose once. Sometimes you're building name recognition. Yeah, he's second in the primary in 2017. He won the nomination in 21 and lost the election, and this is the third go. Generally speaking, I think second time candidates can win because they're building name recognition.
yeah.
Sometimes they chase an incumbent out of a race and they retire. Sometimes they, lose really closely and then pivot to another race and win. Third time candidates, the only one I can ever think of who won was Newt Gingrich in the 70s. Lost the first two times and then got an open seat and finally won.
Well, I
But
was thinking of the guy in Washington, Rossi. Was it Dean Rossi or
Dino Rossi, yeah,
Dino Rossi,
Dino,
who basically ran like for 3 or 4, who almost won. He lost by like less than 100 votes. This was for the Senate, I believe, against Murray. I think no,
yeah,
Cantwell, Cantwell,
he
and then he
lost
kept
a really
running.
close race.
And then he
He
kept
kept
running and he
running,
kept
kept running.
losing. And the more he ran, the worse he did. So you have
Yeah.
that situation with Citarelli. I mean, I just think, look, I think all else being equal, Democrats should win this race. It's an off year. It's the first election after Trump as inaugurated. Generally, these elections go against the incumbent party. Trump is deeply unpopular right now. There's a lot of energy on the Democratic side. I mean, I just sort of it's hard for me to imagine the Democrats losing these races. I'm not saying it can't happen. New Jersey is much more likely than Virginia, but it just seems like if you all else being equal, Democrats should win. In Virginia, I mean, so that's not going to go. If you want to see it right race, you're well tested. Well, the Republican candidate won an election as lieutenant governor, well, on the ticket with Youngkin. She's a disaster. I mean, she's a terrible candidate. Um,
The, the,
and
the
she's likely to lose, I think, by a pretty big margin in Virginia. But the attorney general's race is what is upsetting things here.
our idiot vice president yesterday out there. I don't know if people saw this, but Politico had got their hands on like thousands of pages of chats from the heads, like appointed officials or candidates in the Young Republicans National Federation.
Oh,
And by the way, these are not like college kids. like the college Republicans. One of them was a state legislator in
Yeah.
Vermont, and you've got others who are working in politics. These are people in like their 30s saying absolutely atrocious things,
I mean,
slurs
look,
left and
I
right.
linked to it in my piece today. It is a disturbing article. The things that were said on this. I mean, pro-Nazi stuff, deeply misogynistic, deeply racist, it wasn't just look the thing with Jay Jones in Virginia.
Joking about gas chambers too in there
Goes back gas chambers.
for their
Jay
opponent.
Jones in I'm not defending Jay Jones in Virginia, but this is a text message sent to one person, right? This was a group chat. By the way, this is my goes back to my theory. Never getting involved in a group text. It's a disaster waiting to happen.
I have one
Uh,
with my college friends.
I have a few of them and I hate them. And I'll tell you a funny story. I just got on this. I play pickleball. That's my sort of obsession these
Oh,
days. I'm on, and I got put on the pickleball group text chain, and it's driving
oh.
me up a wall because it's like this one person just keeps texting over and over again, and I'm like, because I'm such an old school person that if my phone vibrates, I feel the need to check it, and if it's a group text, like 9 times out of 10, I don't need to check it. Anyway, I'm getting off subject. The point being these texts were awful, and they were to a group of people, and it was being mutually reinforced. This is not like with the case of the AG candidate in Virginia. This is much, much worse. And
But JD Vance assures us that Jay Jones is so much worse than them.
you know what? I know we don't get like overly partisan on this, and this isn't even a partisan argument. JD Vance is such an asshole. I mean, he really is like the world's biggest asshole. This is a guy who, called Trump America's Hitler, and now just has completely subsumed his ego to this lunatic, and will do anything and will say anything. He's just I mean, the other day, like Elizabeth Warren, he tweeted something about it being Indigenous Day and like the whole thing about her having Native American lineage. Like he just finds ways to he's a troll. He's just an unpleasant person. And by the way, just for the record, this is why I think Republicans are really screwed because not only do they, and we talked about this live last week, they have no post-Trump strategy, but to the extent that they do, it's JD Vance. And if JD Vance is the Republican nominee in 2020, I feel confident that Democrats could nominate anybody and beat that guy. He is so deeply unlikable as a human being.
I I the only time he came off as somewhat likable was in the vice presidential debate, but otherwise you're 100% right.
He's
I
just
picture JD Vance every time he's tweeting, he's like a golden retriever waiting for Trump to pat him on the head because all he does is just like seek approval by being an obnoxious and being a dick about everything. I
everything,
mean,
everything.
and partisan, and he just he brings the vice president as a tat dog to like a new level.
New level.
And he has no shame in anything he does or says. He's willing to lie. He's willing to, anything. And the worst part about it is he's got this self-righteousness about him where
It's
he's
the worst.
decided that like he's fighting for the real people
Right.
and that therefore anything goes. And it's so obnoxious. And honestly, I really almost dislike him more than Trump because at least with Trump, there's a little
Oh,
bit of a
totally.
twinkle in his eye sometimes of like, hey, I'm just trying to get
No,
people's goat
no. But
here.
look, Trump is a hugely damaged human being, right? He's a
Yeah.
broken individual. He has severe personality disorder. And half stuff he says, he doesn't even understand why it's wrong. JD Vance knows it's wrong. JD Vance is well aware it's wrong, but has basically made this decision to um, uh, uh, subsume his ego and to basically carry water for this president. I mean,
I mean,
look,
the worst
all of
part,
them. All of them are like this. They all just are basically, they're all just toadies for this guy.
here's how you know JD Vance is a really terrible person. He attacks immigrants in universities all the time. His in-laws, his I think his mother-in-law was the provost of one of the University of California system schools, and they are both immigrants.
They're both
Uh,
immigrants.
and
His
like
wife is the daughter. She's a
that's
child of immigrants. It's
he's
unbelievable.
just a
Ugh,
really
he's
terrible,
so gross.
terrible person, and he enrages me. And also, how about you do some actual work and not tweeting? Like I tweet a lot, but I'm not vice president of the United States. Isn't there something more important that you could be
Shouldn't
doing
he
with
be
your
doing
time
something other than
instead
tweeting?
of shit
I agree.
posting?
I agree.
Like
I agree.
like a shit
But I think
poster
there's a
has
larger point here. Look, it's politically, when he ran for Senate in Ohio, he w I mean, significantly underperformed the Republican ticket. I think he did like 14 or 15 points, maybe that's off, worse than,
it was more
uh,
than that. It was
he
like
beat Ryan by 5 points, DeWine won by like 20 points. And so he underperformed, and Republicans had to put a lot of money into that race to save him. In a race, but by the way, he should have won handily. A midterm election, a Democratic president midterm election in a red state, it shouldn't even have been close.
DeWine
And
won by 25 points,
25 points, 25
and
points. Yeah.
Vance won by like 5 or 6.
4 or 5 points, I think it was. Again, granted, against a good candidate, but still. And then when he was vice president, he was polling wise the most unpopular vice, or had the lowest approval of any vice presidential candidate ever, lower than Sarah Palin, which is saying something. So I just think that, look, I think right now he's the odds on favorite to be the Republican nominee in 2028, although I expect that to be one of the nastiest primary fights you're ever going to see. Because, I mean, everyone is going to run. Right, Brian Kemp, Chris Sununu, just off the top of my head, Marjorie Green might run. Yeah, it's going to be Rubio might run. It's just going to be a
Ron
shit show.
DeSantis. It's
I
going to
think
be a
I think he's done. I think he's done.
well. I think somebody, either him or his wife, might get indicted by the Republican Attorney General.
Yeah, no, but if you look at some of
For
he's been
that, but
tweeting recently, he's like sort of shied. I mean, he does still do some dickish things, but I think he crashed and burned. I really do think he did.
well, and remember, okay, there's you've triggered like three different little tiny thoughts. Tom Steyer did some ad for the redistricting thing in California, and okay, great, but that guy is the reason we have Ron DeSantis, because he was went against Gwen Graham in the 2018 Florida gubernatorial race. It's a perfect example of what we're talking about nominating candidates who can win in the places that are closest. Gwen Graham had won a Republican seat in the House. She's the daughter of a former governor and senator, great
Very
candidate,
popular
and
governor,
very
senator.
very popular. And Steyer threw all kinds of money into that race, and we ended up with Andrew Gillum, who lost by like 0.2% or something like that,
Barely
because he was
lost.
a disaster and he was way too far to the left. And that gave us Ron DeSantis. And why does that matter? It matters because Ron DeSantis helped make post-COVID Florida a conservative paradise, and a lot of people moved to Florida, and that helped put the state out of reach for Democrats. So the elections matter is the point.
Well,
Um,
but in fairness, that 2018 election, Gillum lost, but also Bill Nelson, the incumbent senator, lost to Rick Scott. And I think Florida just has gone
yeah,
very,
but the
very red.
Bill Nelson race, oh my God, that was the second time that the ballot design in Florida cost Democrats
Yeah,
a critical
yeah,
race.
yeah.
Because he lost by 10,000 seats, and it was because his race was in like a different column or something on the ballot
Yeah.
as from all the rest. But anyway,
It's
the other thought that you jogged there, we're about to see something real interesting in New Hampshire. John Thune got his buddy John Sununu into the race. This is the son, the former U.S. senator,
for the Senate
who
race.
yes, who lost to Gene Shaheen for this seat 18 years ago, is going to try to make a comeback. And why you jog that memory is he said some of the same things that JD Vance said about Donald Trump in 2016. And his latest 2024, he had an op-ed on Donald Trump being a loser. Um, and so
Are he and Chris Sununu brothers? They must be
yes,
brothers.
they are. This is the brother. This is the much. uh, Chris is more of a libertarian. John is more of a classic Reagan conservative.
Okay.
But John was a U.S. senator for one term. I believe he beat Jean Shaheen. It's one of the few actual comebacks. He beat her in 2002, and she crushed him in 2008 in the Obama wave. And has held the seat for 18 years. But he and Thune were freshman House members together, and Thune has recruited him into this race. And it's going to be very interesting to see if he becomes J.D. Vance and contorts himself 800 ways to praise Trump. And if he doesn't, whether Trump gets behind Scott Brown, the former Massachusetts senator,
Who's going to
who
run
is
again?
also running there, and whether we how we see that go. So that was something that jumped at me, because here's another guy who was like saying Trump was the worst thing ever, and now is probably going to want his favor.
I mean, that New Hampshire race, I mean, Chris Sununu not running was huge for Democrats, obviously. I think when he and Brian Kemp decided not to run for Senate seats, it's a pretty good indication of where Republicans think this 2026 is going. Plus, they also both want to run for president. Uh, you know, Democrats got their guy they wanted was Chris Pappas. That's what it was, a congressman. That's who they wanted to
House
run,
member.
and House member, and he's gonna run. I mean, I don't look unless something happens. I see some polling. I'm assuming Democrats have the advantage in that race. Look, the reality is that most of go back to what we talked about at the beginning. Very few of these Senate races are going to be competitive. And my whole theory on this is that Democrats are only competitive in red states if Republicans nominate bad candidates, and that could happen in Texas with Ken Paxton. I mean, ironically, it could happen. Ironically, but that's the wrong word. But it could happen in Louisiana because Bill Cassidy, I think, is very susceptible to a primary challenge. But actually, it won't, because the woman who's running against him is actually not a crazy MAGA
If she
Republican.
runs, if Julia
If she
Laidlaw runs,
Right, if she runs.
um, if she doesn't, then there's some pretty crazy people running against him.
Right, and
But
you get a
without
crazy Republican in Louisiana, maybe. But again, Senate races. I
but
mean,
without
look,
Edwards running,
without Edwards
they
running.
don't have anybody.
And I'll tell you something else. I mean, I mentioned the crazy quotient is a huge thing, but it matters more in governor's races and Senate races, right? The Republicans have nominated plenty of crazy Republicans for the Senate, and they won.
This is
I
the
mean,
biggest. This is the
but it's
biggest
governor's
shift
races where they
in
lose usually.
politics over the last 20 years. 20 years ago, 30 years ago, the crazy quotient mattered in Senate races. You nominated the wrong candidate, you
Yes,
lost. In the last 20 years, we progressively moved toward this point where if you have the right letter next to your name, you are safe. We talked about this last week with Todd Aiken and Richard Murdoch and stuff. But like in governor's races, it still matters. You
it still
nominate
matters.
Chris Kobach, who I
Chris
think
Kobach,
is running.
or
No, he's not running again in
you
Kansas.
had Matt,
He's the
you had Matt
attorney
Bevin,
general.
David Vitter in Louisiana ran against
Right, right,
Edwards.
right,
You had
right.
Matt Bevin, who was the most unpopular governor in the country, running
You,
against Bashir.
you
But
you can lose those governor's races.
but to get to your point, like, you look at the 2010 election as a really interesting inflection point in American politics, where Republicans left at least three seats on the table they should have won. Right, Nevada, Harry Reid was probably the most unpopular incumbent in the country. He basically got to run against Sharon Angle, who was a disaster, and she lost. And the better Republican candidate was beaten in the primary. In Colorado, Michael Bennet won a narrow, thin victory over Ken Buck. And of course, in Delaware, where Christine O'Donnell,
Yeah.
the witch,
Christine, I
knocked
am not a
off.
witch, O'Donnell.
I'm not a witch. O'Donnell knocked off Tom Carper, who, I always say this, like, there's no luckier man in American politics than
You're
Chris
talking about
Coons.
Mike Castle. You said Tom Carper, both
Mike
former
Castle.
governors.
You're right, right. Mike Castle. I get them confused. White moderate Republicans who did usually used
Well,
to do
Carper
well
was a
in Delaware.
moderate Democrat, but
Oh,
they.
right. You're right. Moderate Democrat. Right.
I know why
You're
you're
right.
confusing him. I believe at one point they like flipped jobs,
I think that's
where
right.
one went to governor and one went to be like House member or something like
Right.
that. But they were both longtime fixtures. Castle just passed away
But
this year.
Chris Coons is like that guy's been he's now won the two terms. No, one, two, three terms as senator. The only reason he's a senator is because Republicans foolishly nominated Chris O'Donnell, and he would have lost. He would have
Yeah.
gotten crushed by Castle. So that's an interesting election but this gets to my point. I mean, Republicans should have a much larger majority in the Senate, and they don't, because they continue to nominate. And this goes back to 2010, 2012. You saw with Todd Aiken, and although eventually they did end up winning that seat.
They won
Uh,
that seat. They won the Indiana seat. They
Murdoch,
won.
which they lost initially in 2012, but won in 2018. Right.
Yeah.
I mean, even John Tester running against crappy candidates, eventually he lost as well, and Ohio too. I mean, I'm just saying that, but like Georgia right now, I mean, a relatively sane Republican probably would have beaten Warnock in 2022. Maybe in Arizona, probably a relatively normal Republican would become governor, not Carrie Lake, who lost.
Essentially, I think a nutty candidate can still lose in a purple place. What's changed is it used to be that any state, just about, if you ran a nut job, you could lose that Senate race,
Yes.
whether heavily towards your party or not. Now we've reached a juncture where in those red states or the blue states, if you nominate a nut, and it's usually the red states and the Republicans, they're now able to win. And the best example of this, and maybe it's not fair to call him a nut so much as an absolute fucking moron. The answer is Tommy Tuberville, now running for governor. outgoing U.S. senator who is literally one of the dumbest human beings we've ever seen in elected
I
office.
truly find it remarkable that Tommy Tuberville can walk upright. I really do. Like it's really that him and Marsha Blackburn can both accomplish that feat is extraordinary because they're
Both
both
running for governor.
running for governor, both likely to win because red states get the representatives they deserve. But I think if you look at like all these swing state elections, right? I mean, there's a reason why Democrats have 70% of all the swing state senators and 70% of all the swing state governors because they nominate better candidates. I mean, this is what I've been. We talked about this last week, I think. But what has so annoyed me about the postmortems that Democrats don't know what the hell they're doing. Democrats can't like bullshit. Democrats repeatedly in swing states have nominated stronger candidates, and they keep winning because they nominate good candidates and Republicans don't. And that has happened. It happened a lot in the last cycle. I mean, again, I mean, I mention this all the time. Trump, 4 states that Trump won, Democrats candidates won. And that's partly because of weak Republican candidates. And so I just think that, you have a situation here that is, I think, and look, when Democrats nominate a bad candidate, they lose. Like, and the best example you mentioned Andrew Gillum. I could also mention Mandela Barnes in Wisconsin, who was not a terrible candidate, but he wasn't good enough. And I hate to say this, but a black man running in a swing state, it's a challenge, and he lost, and that's not right or fair. I don't like it. I don't like the fact that a woman can't elect the president, but that's just the reality of the situation. So I do think that look at Pennsylvania for Christ's sake. I mean, would Fetterman have won after his stroke if not running against Dr. Oz, who was a terrible
No,
candidate?
and that
I
was
mean,
because they nominated the wrong guy. Connor Lamb would have won easily.
but Cormac, if he'd been the nominee, would have probably beaten Fetterman.
That's also true. And the other way,
I'm,
yeah, it goes both directions.
it also didn't help them that Mastriano was a dreadful candidate, and he probably dragged down the whole Republican ticket. By the way, we got to go in a sec, but I want to ask you Pennsylvania really quick. Um, John Fetterman, is he running for reelection? And if
No.
so, does he have any chance of winning?
No, John Fetterman is both not running for reelection and would lose a primary. The only thing that could possibly save John Fetterman, there's a real irony in this, is he and Josh Shapiro hate each other. And the irony is his only chance of winning is if Josh Shapiro tells people not to run in a primary against Fetterman because he doesn't want a messy primary while he's trying to win the presidency in the same cycle in Pennsylvania. But I think Fetterman hates the job and wants to either sell books or be president or something. He does not want to be a U.S. senator, so I don't think he runs
Do you
again.
think you don't think
But
he even runs again?
no, I don't think I don't think this is Kirsten Sinema where she would have stayed in the job if she could have won a primary. I think this is a guy who's pretty miserable in the job, doesn't really like it, and ends up not running again, in part because he's a man with no country, but in part because he's just not happy.
Yeah.
And Republicans, he's got much higher favorables now with Republicans than he does with Democrats. The
I don't
problem
think he wins
is
a primary. I don't think he wins a
no, he
primary.
couldn't because he doesn't agree with them on anything except Israel. Um,
Yeah.
but since we're talking about Pennsylvania, I just want to make a quick point. If you live in Pennsylvania, make sure you vote in November. And the reason I say this is Republicans are trying to steal the state Supreme Court. And the way Pennsylvania works, we have what's called a retention election. All you see is the names of 5 judges, 3 state Supreme Court judges, 2 lower court judges. I just filled my ballot out yesterday, where you can check yes or no. Republicans are trying to run this unscrupulous campaign where they don't put any names on it, they don't put any parties on it, where they just say that you're protecting democracy by voting against these 3 Supreme Court justices. But if you do that, you open up the possibility that they steal the state Supreme Court in 2 years, and that for 2 years the Supreme Court is gridlocked 2-2.
Right.
Okay, these are good Democratic justices running for reelection. It's a stupid system, but people don't really understand what's happening. They don't understand the election. This is the first time that real significant money has been run on this. We're seeing ads all the time on these races. It's the first time any of these have ever been even in question. There's only one time that a justice ever lost 20 years ago, and it was about a pay raise and stuff. But so you have something to vote for. It's important. If you live in Pennsylvania, make sure you cast your vote.
That's important. Good. Glad you made that announcement, if you will. But my last question on Fetterman is: Connor Lamb the most likely candidate to take that seat if Fetterman doesn't run?
I think so. And just as background, so everyone knows, Connor's a college classmate of mine. I like Connor a lot. I talk to Connor every so often by email. I want to do a Substack live with him soon, but he just had a new baby. Um, but Connor's a really good guy. I think, with no inside information, I think from the fact that he's become much more active over the last year as Fetterman has kissed up to Trump, I think he runs there. I think some of the elected officials, like Brendan Boyle, who's a congressman from Philadelphia, and some of the other Chris Deluzio, congressman out in Western Pennsylvania, I think those guys may wait for McCormick and a shot at a Republican senator. Um,
Mhm.
Especially because if you had President Shapiro, that would be his number one priority in the midterms. Even though midterms go against the president's party, his number one priority would be, hey, I want my own state. I want to win this seat. But I think that there's more of an incentive to wait than there would have been had Bob Casey won re-election.
Right. Is
Um,
Casey's not going to try
no,
to run
Casey's
again.
sort of said he's doesn't want to go away, but he's done for running. But you have a fair number of very ambitious Democratic congressmen who want to run for things. And I would think the other thing that you have to watch is you're going to have an open gubernatorial race in 2030, whether Shapiro is just term limited or he's in the White House and Austin Davis is an appointed governor, the lieutenant governor. So there are going to be some races that might be more attractive than challenging an incumbent U.S. senator if Fetterman runs again. I think Connor will take him on again if he runs, because Connor has the unique ability. He was the moderate in that race in 2022. He
He
had a
was.
moderate voting record. He held a swing
But don't forget,
district.
Fetterman wasn't the liberal. That was Malcolm Kenyatta was the liberal.
Right, was the most liberal of five candidates. Fetterman was more the blue collar Bernie kind of dynamic, but Connor has the moderate profile, and now because he's spoken up against both Fetterman and Trump, the leftist groups love him. So he could unify people in a way that a lot of others could not.
Okay, I want to. Can I interject here? Because we got to
Sure.
finish up, but I want to bring up one point because I meant to mention this earlier about Graham Plattner and me, and you mentioned Bernie Sanders. So Sanders has come out basically in support of Plattner, which is one of the reasons why he's been raising so much money and one of the reasons why he got this big boost. Am I crazy in thinking that Bernie Sanders' track record, as far as in endorsing candidates, is dreadfully bad? And I'm trying to think of where his endorsement actually helped. I think he endorsed Kenyatta actually in Pennsylvania in 2022 in
I
the
don't
Senate race.
remember. I bet he endorsed Mandela Barnes in 2022, though.
I'm
That would be
sure he
my
did.
guess. But the thing with Sanders is, I think he can have an impact in primaries, and he's not always ideological. Like I said, he likes Rebecca Cook in Wisconsin. But he favors a populist type that tends to be blue collar and not have a lot of electoral experience because he's inherently an insurgent. He doesn't like
Yes.
the establishment. And those candidates, as Fetterman has shown, first of all, have a certain ideological, I guess, I don't even know what the right word is. They're not as rooted in their ideological positions as Bernie the socialist is. But also, they because they haven't held elected office before, because a lot of them are primary challengers or in long shot races, their skills are untested. And so
Yes.
for every John Fetterman you might get who was a Bernie guy in 2016 who
Hey,
impresses people because he's
but he won. He was a
different.
mayor and he was lieutenant governor. I mean, he didn't just like
Right.
come out of nowhere
Right. But he was a mayor of a small town, and he was only lieutenant governor because he ran for Senate in 16 and
and
lost
he
in that
lost.
primary, finished like
Right.
third. But impressed people as being kind of quirky and blue collar, and
Yeah.
people
He's definitely
once
quirky.
Trump won, the only thing that elevated Fetterman is once Trump won, in 2016, people said, "Oh, we need a blue collar guy. This big tattooed guy from Braddock is
Right.
exactly the bald guy is the right thing." By the way, since we're talking Pennsylvania politics, I just got an email. How great is our electoral system for everybody who hates mail balloting? I put my ballot in my mailbox yesterday. I just got my email right now from my county saying that we have gotten your ballot back. Notification 24 hours, mail ballot, never left my
Awesome.
house.
Awesome.
Got that back. But Fetterman only came about because of Trump winning and people saying, "Oh, we need somebody who's more blue collar." So then they said, "Yeah, let's make him lieutenant governor." And that gave him the name recognition he needed to run for Senate. But like, I really don't think he runs again. And I think there's a lot of good, ambitious congressmen. And the other name, a couple of names that you will watch if they win in 2026, Janelle Stelson, who was a news anchor and is running against Scott Perry for the second time. It's outside of Harrisburg or around Harrisburg is the seat. But if she picks up a seat that had been held by Republicans for generations, people are going to talk about her statewide. And Paige
Sure.
Continetti, if she knocks off Rod Bresnahan in Scranton, she's going to have two incentives to look statewide. The first being that she will have knocked off a Republican congressman in an area where Democrats have been bleeding votes, but
Yeah.
also because Democrats have been bleeding votes there, and that seat is not going to be so easy to hold. That
Right.
that is a seat that was designed originally as a
So
vote sink.
if you win in a wave election, you probably should try to aim for the next thing because you're probably going to lose it in 2 years or 4 years.
That's a possibility. I mean, that Scranton seat is real indicative of Democrats of the shifting coalitions. That was originally designed as a vote sink. They connected two Democratic districts through like a meandering line, and eventually a Republican won the district finally in 2024 because Democrats started doing worse and worse and worse in those blue collar areas. And we saw it in Youngstown in Ohio, Scranton in Pennsylvania, these places that were as late as the like 2010 election cycle were rock ribbed Democratic places,
Right. Right.
where they've just fallen apart. But like those are two people who are ambitious who may see their names catapult into the statewide spotlight in 28 and 30.
By the way, this is one of the reasons why I really enjoy talking. I'm from Pennsylvania. I was not born. I was born in Detroit. That's why I'm a Detroit Lions fan. But I grew up in Pennsylvania, and I'm obviously very very sort of I don't know. I have a attachment to my home state, and so I love talking to Brian because Brian is the expert on Pennsylvania politics and the person and as an absolute just insane reservoir of knowledge about Pennsylvania politics. So I just love having the conversation to talk to him about stuff like this because he knows this thing inside and out. It's awesome. I just want also, by the way, I want to thank, we have 255 people and we've been at 250 for a while now. So you people have come in here and you have stayed. And I am so proud of you and I'm so impressed. And I'm
And
so
every week we're getting bigger and bigger.
humbled.
Tell your friends.
Yes. Tell your
Um,
friends. This is a great conversation. We
Next
love
week
doing
we may
this.
have to do a different time, but we will be here Wednesdays every week. I have an appointment next week. I'm gonna stop scheduling anything on Wednesday afternoon. Um, but
Yeah,
but
yeah, I know.
we're
Seriously,
here
seriously.
every
I know this
Wednesday.
is awesome, and somebody, by the way, did ask about if this is archived, and yes, it is. It will be
Yes.
up on I think both of our sites. It'll be on
Both
my
of our
site for sure, John.
Substacks this afternoon. You can share it with your friends, and it's a great thing because we get three audiences. We get people who read it on my Substack, people who read it on Michael's Substack, and those of you who are here live. And you have the benefit. If you're here live, you can drop comments in that we might respond to. So tell your friends. Wednesday afternoons, we're gonna call if we're going with the two bearded Jews uh,
I like two guys who
tagline.
light the menorah talk politics. I can
Okay,
also go
if
two
we're going with
guys.
that, I want Adam Sandler to write us a theme.
Fair enough. Two guys who play with dreidels. Two guys
Yeah,
to
who
who've
light the
worn
menorah.
to fill in. We can really two guys
Two
who know all
guys
the
for
words.
Adam Sandler's next Hanukkah song.
Absolutely, absolutely. Two guys who know all the words to Tikva. I mean, we could really go. There's a lot of ways we can go on this thing, but for now, like two guys who like the menorah. Anyway, listen, I think we're going to finish up there. I mean, if anybody has I don't know if anything else we need to talk about. We hit on
Let's see. My girlfriend has to drop a comment in the chat that I need to write a book about Pennsylvania politics.
very nice, very nice. I would read that for sure. Um, Look, I think one of the reasons why I love doing this is just there's so much to talk about in politics. It's just fun, it's interesting, and we haven't talked a lot about Trump in this call, which is not accidental because I think we would just be depressed. It would be it's a difficult subject, and I hope that for all those of you who are here, and I'm sure most of you here are not big fans of the president. I'm going to be out on Saturday at the No Kings rally, and I have in the past as a journalist, I have always said I will not go to demonstration, not go to political protest. I make an exception. I may write a piece about this because I think it is so important. I think what's happening in this country is so disturbing. And I don't know how closely people are following what's happening in Chicago. I've been really obsessing on that story. And it is so unbelievably disturbing what is happening in an American city perpetrated by ICE and Border Patrol agents. And it just is, I feel like there's a moment when we are journalistic objectivity, and I'm an opinion journalist, so I mean, I have that. But I think we've surpassed the point in this country when we should be thinking about that. We should be thinking about our democracy. And I mean that not as a Democratic partisan, but as a small d Democrat who believes in democracy. And we are not in a great place. to put it mildly. So I'm just I will be there on Saturday with my kids. I encourage all of you to go. It is important, even if you don't feel overly partisan. It is important to make your voices heard. That what is happening in this country right now is not acceptable.
And by the way, I would add that one of the most unacceptable things is that Republicans, mainstream, supposedly Republicans, leaders of their party, have been branding the people who are going to march on Saturday as
Absolutely,
terrorists, which is
absolutely.
sends a shudder down my spine because the only reason you say stuff like that is because you want to crack down on good American citizens exercising their most fundamental rights to protest their government. And it's bullshit. They're not terrorists. These are your neighbors, your friends, your family members, and they are exercising their most fundamental right. And this is an attempt at intimidation and everything that's un-American.
It's also
Um,
delegitimization. It's
yeah,
delegitimization of political protest, of saying that if you're protesting the president, you hate. I
and
mean,
of your
Tom,
opposition.
right. I mean, I think Tom Emmer, who's like not even that,
That's yeah,
he said like it's they hate America. I don't hate America. I love America, and
America.
that is why I will be bringing my kids on Saturday to this march because I love my country and I hate what is happening to it, and I hate the people who are in charge right now and what they're doing to this country. And I want to be very clear on this point. I know I people think I'm a partisan, and I certainly lean politically, but this is not a partisan argument, and I mean that sincerely. This is not a
No, it's
partisan
not.
argument. Okay, I think sometimes we have to think of this, we have to sort of, it's very hard. We live in a very polarized moment in American history. But this is not partisan to say that it is wrong for the president of the United States to send the military to a major American city and to basically ignore the rule of law. That's not a partisan argument. That is a small d democratic argument. And that is where I am right now. And that's why I'm going to be out there protesting on Saturday with my kids. And I think I encourage all of you, if you feel as I do, to do the same. I think it is important. I know that protest doesn't change anything, or at least in the near term, but it's important to make your voices heard and to make clear to the country and to the president and to his supporters that there are people in this country who are not happy with the way things are going.
And ISIS completely and totally out of control. They are acting like thugs and
Yes.
doing all sorts of things that are really bad, and that are unacceptable, quite frankly, in a democratic country. And this stuff, I don't talk about it as much in part because I was discouraged that people didn't listen to these arguments in 2024. Although I have had one never Trump conservative friend tell me that I was right and he was wrong about how bad things would be. Um, but it really is terrible. Though I will say the president actually did one good thing this week, Michael, and it's not the thing you think I'm going to bring up. He got a COVID and a flu shot. Um,
Yeah, he did. It's true.
so if you're anybody out there who thinks that Bobby Kennedy Jr. is anything but a loon, there's Donald Trump telling you that his Health and Human Services Secretary is a loon
Yeah.
without telling you.
Yeah, exactly. That's a good point. All right, this was awesome. An hour and 51 minutes of political
We're pretty soon. We're
geekdom.
just gonna turn this into a podcast and make it 2 or 3 hours a week. And I don't know. Anybody out there want to sponsor us? We are open. I'll wear one of those little golf shirts, like the pro golfers with a little logo on it. We can rock the polos. So if you want to
Absolutely.
sponsor us, let us know.
But listen, but thank you so really. I'm touched, humbled that so many of you joined and stayed on this for so long. We'll be back next Wednesday with more political goodness to discuss, and we hope to see you back then, and hope that you subscribe to my newsletter, Truth and Consequences, and certainly subscribe to Brian's The World According to Brian.
Yeah.
And have a great week, have a great weekend, and
Yeah.
hopefully I'll see you're out.
Have a
I'll
great
see some of you out
weekend.
on Saturday.
Yep. Take care.
All right, bye bye.